This is in Korean, but it says, don't try and understand it, feel it. The problem is, there's nothing to feel. Sam's cup of tea. Sam's cup of tea. All right, I'm just going to go off the cuff here. So this is a spoiler-free review. I'm not going to spoil anything in this. I'm just going to talk honestly about my first impressions of the movie. I haven't written a script or anything like that. Just to give you some context, I'm a big Christopher Nolan fan. Love Interstellar, Dunkirk, The Prestige, Memento, the Dark Knight series. Loved Inception as well. That grew on me over time. I got to see this movie early because I live in Korea, and it was released, I think it was yesterday, and today is the 24th. Unfortunately, I didn't enjoy this movie at all. So this was written by Christopher Nolan, and it feels like that. It's very Nolan-ish, the designs of it, the parallel narratives that fuse together, just everything about it. The main character is John David Washington, and it stars Robert Pattinson and Elizabeth Debicki and a few others. Michael Caine's in it, Kenneth Branagh. John David Washington is good. At the beginning, I really liked his character, but as it went on, I lost the plot. Literally, figuratively and literally, I lost the plot. It's a high concept movie, this, and looking at the trailers before I watched this, I was so excited for this. Seeing what Christopher Nolan had done on Inception and Interstellar, there's mind-bending ideas. I couldn't wait to see what he was going to do with time inversion and what was going to be the secret meaning. And those moments are great, and the time inversion is really clever. It must have took a long time, and it's very thought out, the way that they have inverted people interacting with non-inverted people, and there's a whole story element to that. But this film is hugely incoherent, and I don't know whether it was to do with the audio in the cinema or it was just the sound design. And I've had this problem before in Christopher Nolan films. I've found that sometimes his dialogue is kind of lost in the mix with the audio. I noticed it in Inception, and sometimes in the Dark Knight series at some points. There's just points where, and if you've watched a Christopher Nolan film, you will know that characters spout off a lot of exposition, and in order to understand what's happening, you need to be able to hear that. You need to be able to understand and comprehend what's being said. And there's a few points in Inception where I've repeated viewing solved that problem for me, where I was like, okay, I know what he's saying. There's a plane noise, and just the brash score, the Hans Zimmer score would drown out sometimes what was being said. This movie is like that, turned up to 11. If you didn't understand Inception, this is far harder to understand. And what's worse is that he lacks going into this movie, and even on this bloody poster, it says, don't, my girlfriend translated it, this is in Korean, but it says, don't try and understand it, feel it. The problem is, there's nothing to feel, because there isn't an emotional center to this movie. There is an attempt at that, but for me, it felt completely flat, and at times it bordered on parody. So the movie starts off with a bang. It starts off right in the midst of it, and immediately you don't understand what's going on. And not only because you're not given, you're given visual cues of things that are going on, but characters are already off the bat talking through gas masks, over sound, over explosions, over music, and I couldn't hear what the hell was being said. And I was thinking, okay, I'm prepared to not understand this. In time, this will make more sense. And the movie just goes on and on like that. It's not to say that people aren't trying. The cast is really great. John David Washington is really great in this. So is Robert Pattinson. Robert Pattinson probably stood out the most because he was the most consistent in terms of he had some charisma, and he was the only person that seemed to exhume some kind of humor. John David Washington looked confused from one scene to the next. And you know when they say when they film a movie, they say like sometimes they'll film the last scene on the first day. And you watch a movie and you're like, I can't imagine that. I can't imagine the finale being filmed on the first day. And, you know, halfway through the film is filmed on the first day. And, you know, like this, if you watch this movie, it feels like that. It feels like John David Washington's just been plunged into the finale scene right at the beginning, and it's just the main character looks as confused as you feel, and it never pauses long enough to give you a chance to just think about what's going on and absorb it. And it's so cold. This movie is stone cold, and that was one of my big criticisms about Inception. When I first went to see it at the cinema, the spectacle was overwhelming. It was great, but I found Marianne Cotillard and that subplot, the central plot, the heart of the story, so to speak, between Leonardo DiCaprio and Marianne Cotillard, his ex-wife, to be a little bit, you know, not quite convincing. And then everything else was so kind of steely, factually, exposition heavy. I just found it quite like, ooh, I don't know if I gel with this. I don't know if I'm feeling it. And over time, I grew to love it. But Tenet is just so difficult I just didn't feel anything about it. The problems begin right at the beginning with John David Washington's character, who is just kind of he's like a James Bond without any of the context. He's just thrust into this mission, and you're given not much context from him from what you see, and that can be good in certain ways, but through him, he then later meets Elizabeth Debicki's character, who is married to the titular villain, Kenneth Branagh's Russian villain, you know, and you know, I think his connection, John David Washington's connection with her, you know, is supposed to be the heart of the movie, the emotional center, but it doesn't work because you never really understand. Like, I honestly can't remember how they first met. And I asked my girlfriend this when we came out of the cinema. I was like, do you remember how, you know, John David Washington and Elizabeth Debicki's character, how did they meet? And we didn't remember. It wasn't memorable at all. And it's just one steal. And you get these long exposition heavy, typical Nolan, you know, scenes where, you know, it's one character looking at the other with a stone cold face and explaining how things work, how the world works. But the movie is just that the whole time. And there are a few little breaks, but by the time those come, they're from characters you don't care about. And you're so deep into the story that you're just like, I don't care anymore about this. Now, that being said, if I was hearing this and I hadn't seen the movie, I would think, well, hang on a minute, you know, the spectacle. What about what about the time inversion stuff? That stuff's really cool, right? But even that starts to outstay its welcome, because if you don't understand it, it just looks like nonsense to you, right? Even in Inception, you had some understanding of like, they're in a dream. Okay, they're in a dream. I think they're in a dream of a dream, whatever. There isn't a point from this that it jumps from. It's just like one montage after the other. It's locations, it's fancy locations. And it feels like the most extreme case for Nolan of style over substance. It looks like the trailer. And the problem is that when you don't understand what's going on and the exposition is drowned out by huge loud music, I couldn't understand what was happening. And so a lot of the key scenes, the impressive scenes, are in the trailers. We've seen them, right? They're just extended longer. You know, there's been all the talk of, they crashed a real plane into their thing. Well, you see that and you're like, yeah, didn't feel anything. Just was watching it like, yeah, this is like the trailer. And then the you know, time inverted fight and stuff. And it's all really clever. It's all in really impressive stuff, but it just doesn't have any emotional weight to it. It's just too heady. And the problem is that the stakes are linked intricately with your understanding of it. So, for example, I'll give you a comparison. Interstellar, right? Interstellar is a movie that, as it goes on, it gets more difficult to understand what's happening. But for the first 40 or 50 minutes, Matthew McConaughey lives on a farm. He's got a daughter. He's got a son. He's going off to this space mission. And you have this, like, human, very easy to understand connection where everything goes off. They need to save the world. It's dying. They're going to go on a space mission. And from there, they're going to go up, and then it's going to, things are going to get weird from there. So when the weird shit starts to happen later, even if you don't understand it, you understand the fundamental core of it, which is that he's sad because he's away from his kid. When they tell you that on a planet, an hour is like 12 years, you understand the stakes of that, right? You're like, shit, he's left his daughter there. His daughter's going to be 50 or whatever. Same in like The Dark Knight. Let's take that for an example. There's a great chase scene in The Dark Knight when the Joker is chasing Harvey Dent, right? A similar sort of scene in Tenet where there's a huge big like highway chase scene, right? The difference between those two things isn't anything to do with the visual stuff or anything like that. They're both really, really impressive and practically done and fun to look at, right? Eye candy. But the difference is in The Dark Knight, you know exactly what's going on. The Joker's trying to get Harvey Dent and you're thinking, shit, no, I don't want him to, In this, I didn't know what was happening. I didn't know why any of it was going on. There was cars flipping upside down. I just didn't understand any of it. Maybe I'm an idiot. And there'll be people on here like, you just want those kinds of films that are, dumbed down Hollywood. No, I don't. I love Christopher Nolan and I love the fact that he doesn't talk down to. But there's a difference between making your film complex and making your film just ridiculously difficult to understand, where you can't hear the dialogue. You should be able to hear the dialogue, right? This could have been an audio issue in the cinema, but apparently we're in the Dolby Atmos suite. And it was just this blaring bass of, as people were talking. And it just looked like, I remember watching it at one point and there was a panning camera angle. It was Robert Pattinson and John David Washington talking, and they were explaining the plot. They were explaining what they were going to do or whatever. I think, Robert Pattinson was explaining to our main character, what's going on. And there was all this noise, right? There was this music and stuff, and it was panning around. And then below that, under the mix, was just the dialogue. It felt like it was secondary to the style, to the substance was not treated with enough respect and enough reverence. It needs to be the central point of the movie, and it just isn't here. It just isn't. So then we follow this character who actually is called the protagonist. Now that can work sometimes. The characters don't have to have names to have meanings, but I don't remember what any of the other characters were called. Neither did my girlfriend. We didn't understand any. My girlfriend understood more as we were getting towards the end, but so as it goes on, there is a lot of style over substance. And there's a lot of, just posh restaurants and nice locations, but no real reason for it, And the point I was getting to is that the stakes for the movie, which is kind of end of the world kind of stuff, we are told, right? We're told, is difficult to visualize in your head if you don't understand the fundamental plot points. If you don't understand the science behind it, you actually don't understand the stakes at all, because the stakes are something you've got to imagine in your head, right? So it's like saying, I don't know, for example, a madman has control. This isn't actually in the movie, but let's say a madman has control of a submarine, right? He has control of a submarine that has, a nuclear capability, and he can press the button and he's crazy, right? You understand the stakes straight away. You understand that if he presses that button, and he's likely to do so because he's mad, right? In this movie, you don't understand what the stakes are. There is no obvious, tangible thing that we can go, oh yeah, it's all linked up with the whole inversion thing and understanding that. And because if you don't, and it's really difficult to get on the first time, the stakes completely fall out, right? Whereas in other Christopher Nolan movies, if you didn't understand the fundamental, the fundamental rules of the movie and the intricate details of the plot, it didn't matter because the stakes were still something that you got from the beginning, right? In Interstellar, he's saving the world. The world is dying. We understand why and how, right? We don't need to know the scientific reason, but the crops are dying and they're going to be dead soon. And the emotional pull is that he's left his daughter and his thing, right? In Inception, it's to do with his wife, right? And his wife is dead and he can't get over it. And he's, there's all that kind of stuff. In this, who knows, right? And the character that we follow, the protagonist, he doesn't have, seemingly from the beginning, any link to anything. It's sort of like he just wakes up and it just doesn't work. And anyway, Elizabeth Debicki's character, I didn't like her character at all. What she's got to play with, she has this sympathetic role which is linked to her son, who we never see, right? We never see any relationship with that. Everyone walks around for the first probably 30 to 60 minutes, walking around in really nice, luxurious places, wearing nice, luxurious things, being really smug and saying facts. That's all this boils down to. Two-dimensional characters that we don't see. We see Michael Caine doing his classic Christopher Nolan thing where he's playing somebody who's spouting exposition. That didn't make any sense to me. It didn't emotionally resonate. Who is he to him? Don't know. There's a scientist woman, I can't remember who plays her, but she explains the things to him, but it's like she's been told to act like a robot. It's bizarre. And as it goes on, I just lost more and more kind of engagement with it. And it's just a real shame. It's just a real shame. It just lacks something. And this time I think this is the first time in a long time that Nolan's made a movie without Hans Zimmer making the score. So this time it was Ludwig Göransson, who's done amazing work. I love his score on The Mandalorian. He's done a lot more work as well. But unfortunately for me, it didn't stand out. And there were times when I found it to be just too much. It just was too much. And there were times when the score was there at moments when I was trying to listen to what was happening. And there's a moment in the movie, and I'm not going to spoil any particular moment, but there's a part in the movie about halfway through when things slow down a little bit, just for a bit, and two characters have a conversation. There's a whole scene where there's no music, and it was refreshing to have a scene there that was actually enjoyable to watch. I was like, oh my God, I understand what's happening here. But unfortunately, it's in the middle of the fucking movie, and I don't actually know how we're getting here and where we're going. But anyway, Kenneth Branagh plays the villain. He's got a Russian accent, and he's good in it. He's good, but again, I didn't understand quite his relevance to it. And now looking back, I've been able to think about it and think about the fundamental, what the movie means, having talked to my girlfriend who understood more about it. And it doesn't change anything for me. And this is the difference, was that when I came out of Inception or Interstellar, there were movies, and Dunkirk, for example, they're movies that, almost all Christopher Nolan movies, bar The Dark Knight series, are movies that you want to see again. They reward repeat viewing. But this movie, although I didn't understand quite what had happened, I had barely any enthusiasm to watch it. I said, I don't think I could sit through this movie again. I don't think I could. It just got dull, and it went on and on. And you can have these big, huge action set pieces, but they have to have stakes, right? They look fantastic, but they have to have some kind of stake. And towards the end, it's almost like a parody of Christopher Nolan himself, where there is a similarly confusing set piece in Inception when they are in the snow towards the end of the movie, when they're fighting in the snow, and you've got these soldiers dressed in white in the snow on these snowmobiles, and then our heroes, our protagonists, are also wearing white, but a different kind of slightly different shade or a different pattern. And when you first watch it, you just have no idea what the fuck is going on, right? But it doesn't leave you too long on that moment, and then there's the climax moment, and it resolves. And watching it again, you can see. But there's a few examples in that movie of going, I don't know what's happening. The visual language isn't quite clear, and you can tell that somebody should have been sitting down with Christopher Nolan and been like, I know you understand it and we understand it, but does the audience understand it? And you can say that's down to intelligence, but not being able to distinguish between one shade of white and another isn't really about intelligence. It's just about being clear, right? There are subtle ways to do that better. And this film has that in spades. It just has that in spades. And because it's dealing with such a complex subject matter, you would think that they would make an emotional base, something to grab onto, to go, look, I don't understand this, but I care about this character, I care about that. I didn't care about any character in this movie. I did not care about any of them. It was just style over substance. And the thing is that, you know, it was a classic case as well of seeing stuff I'd seen in the trailer elongated and going, that's it. And usually, you know, even if I've seen a trailer for every Christopher Nolan movie, even if I've seen that clip or I've seen that moment, when I see it in the movie, in the context with the music and the dialogue and what's going on, it's like a completely different experience. It's like, oh, that compared to that, it's just, you know. But in this, it's exactly the same. In fact, it's lesser because it's not, you know, it's just in this long 2.5-hour movie. And I was just looking at it like, right, that's the bit where, you know, and I just wasn't joining the dots. And this went on and on and on. And by the end, it honestly felt like somebody who was trying to copy Nolan, who had this really grandiose idea and thought he was going to be the next Christopher Nolan. It doesn't, and it feels like Christopher Nolan getting carried away. And I'm so depressed to admit it because I really wanted to love this film. I love Christopher Nolan, and you know, I hope this is just a flash in the pan and he goes on to make another amazing movie, and I'm sure he will, and this film will do really well. But I'd be surprised if a lot of people honestly went in this movie and came and understood it and felt, you know, close to the characters. There is a really, really ludicrous part towards the end which cuts, and Nolan likes to do this with a lot of his films where he'll juxtapose something that is traditionally epic, right? Like a big, you know, someone's falling in a black hole in Interstellar, and then at the same time, at the same moment, parallel, but in a linked way, cutting to someone just in a bookcase having a revelation in a room, right? In the middle of, you know, a farm. And that those two things are linked, that you can have this very small moment, seemingly, but it's connected to this giant epic moment. And they try and do it with Tenet, but it was laughable. And the lack of humor in this film is just, it's comical. It really is, because people walk around with this, like, saying this just crazy dialogue, and then they'll switch it and try and make that person sympathetic, like they do with Elizabeth Debicki's character, where she's kind of smug and kind of, you know, I know it all, and they try to play it a little bit like, you know, a sort of femme fatale who's, you know, strong on the outside, but inside, you know, she's struggling with a lot of stuff, but it's done in this sort of like such a cliche way of not acknowledging the absurdity of it. You know, that, yeah, we're in a fancy, you know, in The Dark Knight, they have those moments in the fancy restaurants and Bruce Wayne, but we have that really great kind of subtext of of Bruce Wayne is pretending to be this because it's actually all nonsense and we all know it. And the real character is Batman, and then what Bruce Wayne really is he's a humanitarian. This movie feels like it forgets all of that. It's just pure style. It's purely, there is even a moment when Michael Caine makes a reference to his suit and how it's not quite, you know, up to scratch, or the tailor. And I was like, what? Like, what is this about? Like, it's just bizarre. And there's just, trying to relate to this movie is really difficult. It just massively disappointed. So I recommend you go see this film if you're a Christopher Nolan fan and make your own mind up. I hope you enjoy it, but I really didn't. And I feel like this was a prime example of style over substance and a misunderstanding that you have to have a solid foundation, a solid emotional human connection. This felt like it was made for a robot. It was made for somebody who just wants to see how they invert time, and that was amazing. Those moments are great, and I love the fact that he steers away from using CGI, but towards the end, even the inversion the inversion effects were kind of getting old with me. Perhaps it was because I didn't have any connection to what was happening, but I really did laugh at this movie at points. It got comical. And then at the end, the final set piece, which they should know as storytellers, as filmmakers, they should understand that, by this point people will be so lost and confused, and the ending, the duality of the ending set piece montage, the epic finale, is in itself quite difficult to understand what's going on. And then at the end they drop another twist on top of that, and I was just like, I'm out. I'm out, and I'm out to the point where I can hardly be asked to Google, Tenet ending explained, Tenet plot explained. I'm going to give it some time, and maybe, when it comes to, VOD, video on demand, I'll watch it again with fucking subtitles or with headphones, because I'm hoping it was just a glitch in the cinema. But I honestly cannot hear what people are saying. And that's massively important for a movie where the basis of understanding is actually not visual. It's exposition. It's just characters looking really suave and wearing cravats and wearing suits and shit like that, and sitting in fancy 5-star hotels and restaurants and on yachts and outlooking Italy. And you're thinking, why are we here? What is going on? What does it all mean? And all the characters are saying is, do you remember the Cold War in 1960? This links to this, and there's this new technology. It's the end of the world. And why is it the end of the world? How is it the end of the world? What does it all mean? And there's no, and the connection between the main character, John David Washington, and everybody else is so tentative. And it's so like, it's not even explained until the end. And by that point, you're just like, it was 2.5 hours ago we started this movie, and you're telling me now that this, this is the connection between this person and... Oh, no. In my opinion, this is a classic example of someone just jumping the shark with their own vision. And I feel like Christopher Nolan is great at orchestrating these really complex set pieces and putting them together, right? He's brilliant at that. But I feel like what he needed was someone sat by him and just kind of mitigating that with a more human approach, with something that was like, right, remember, we've got to, what about, how is this going to be received on first viewing? And, while I completely subscribe to the idea that it's great that movies that are made that are layered, right, that reward repeat viewing, there's nothing wrong with that. But what I really take issue with is a film that just doesn't even make any attempt to be coherent the first run. And he's like, yeah, you're just not going to understand any of it. You probably understand a little bit, then you got to watch it again to even understand just even who people were in relation to each other. That's ridiculous. That's ridiculous. It was never the case in Inception or Interstellar. I understood everybody's relation to things. I just didn't understand the mechanics of what they were doing. Or, Interstellar, I understood who everybody was. I just didn't understand, how does that work physically? Is that really possible? So he's what now? This is just like, who is this? Why is this person talking to this person? Who's that again? It just massively anticlimactic throughout the whole thing. Visually interesting, narratively void. And for a film that a lot of people will say, and I can already see it, on YouTube, there's going to be why Tenet's a masterpiece and and why, and people, and I've seen there are not many reviews online, but I saw, someone said Nolan fans are going to love picking this apart for years to come. And it's like, the thing they're forgetting is that in other Christopher Nolan films, the reason why we unpack it is because we care, because there's an emotional heart to the film. You want to understand because you care. This movie, you don't. Like, I walked away from it and I just thought, I don't care why any of these characters have come together. I don't care what the world is. There's no stakes. So that's it. So unfortunately, I'm going to give Tenet 2 cups out of 5 because it really is a disappointment, massive disappointment. Perhaps in the future, I'll do another video following up when I watch it again on video on demand, but I can't see myself doing another trip to the cinema, risking the COVID landscape, the COVID, risking my life on others during the COVID outbreak. It wasn't worth it. It really wasn't. I'm glad I've seen it and I know, but it was hugely depressing to see it. And and it's sad to say it because you can see how much work's gone into it, But to me, it was incoherent, inconsistent, cold, and it was just wildly off the mark, you know. And I feel like it was a little bit. It felt like the whole thing was in love with its own farts, and I'm sure you can have that with any Nolan movie. Anything that is this ambitious, which every Nolan film is, you know, is always in danger of walking that fine line between, you know, being pretentious and being, you know, in love with its own facts and self-indulgent. But this just crosses that line completely. It falls right into that void. There is no, you know what I mean? It doesn't walk that balance well. And that's it. So, Tenet, 2 cups out of 5. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe. Sounds Cup of Tea, signing off. Sam's Cup of Tea.